Views indicate an evidence base for environment and policy interventions. So not only association, but also interventions to promote a better environment for physical activity are effective. This is a kind of research artifact, greater evidence base for approaches that have a higher evaluability. So SciNet stairs is easier to evaluate, so there's a better evidence base, more studies on this than on these more complex interventions. Okay, I think that's it for the moment with regard to the evidence base. Just to add on this, on strategies based on these research results, there are also two examples here in my presentation. The first relates to the European Physical Activity Guidelines. There are at least my colleague Winfried Banzer and me who were members of the working group who developed these guidelines, and we were quite surprised that the EU was not so much interested in new recommendations like the ones that has been presented by Liedeke from WHO this morning, because they said, okay, we do have these WHO recommendations, we don't need to start to invent the wheel again. So they were interested in recommendations how to implement things, how to develop policy. I think that was a very good decision. So they, these European Physical Activity Guidelines also suggest strategies, and some of these strategies then already deal with what we would say best practice criteria in terms of quality demands, because they are, for example, recommend intersectoral cooperation and intersectoral policy development. And this is one of the quality criteria if we think about infrastructure development for promoting physical activity, that it's an intersectoral approach. Easy said, difficult, very difficult done in political terms, but that's the only way to go. There are other recommendations here, like WHO document again for population-based approach, increasing levels of physical activity. And again, you see some of these same quality indicators as guiding principles here, that they, for example, should be socially inclusive and participatory. This leads back what we heard before about the domains of the Ottawa Charter as quality indicators, participatory and multisectoral in their approaches to development. So, conclusion from with regard to the strategies, there are some priorities with regard to a broader concept of physical activity in these strategies. There is still a strong focus on health-enhancing physical activity. There is still, I think, more work has to be done to integrate the sport and the physical activity communities in these international approaches. But important are, as quality indicators for developing infrastructures for physical activity, is participation processes, different stakeholders involved, community involvement, multi-sector approaches again. So my last point is just very short, 3-4 slides related to new proposed EU guidelines which relate to the improvement of infrastructures for leisure time physical activity in the local arena. And you see these guidelines focus especially on social equity, intersectoral collaboration and participation. So they take certain quality criteria that I try to sketch out here, quality criteria that come from health promotion, from the core concept of health promotion, to see them as guiding principles for developing these guidelines. These guidelines come and has been developed by an EU project, the PART2 project, Improving Infrastructures for Leisure Time Physical Activity, funded by DG Sanko, the idea, among others, or the task of this project was to develop guidelines for the improving of infrastructures for physical activity. These are our partners, so it was a group, or is still a group, of researchers on the one hand and policymakers on the other, research institutions and policy institutions from 12 European countries. Difficult task to coordinate such a process, but I think we did quite successful. Different steps to get to the guidelines. The final draft will be presented at the POINT conference in a few weeks, also here in Frankfurt. You're all invited to come 8th and 9th of November. And you see, within the process of developing the guidelines, we did some research. We did also some policymaker workshops to get feedback from the different countries on the first draft of the guidelines. And as I said, we are now developing the final draft for the POINT conference in November. What is these guidelines all about? It's mainly provide a checklist for assessment on the one hand. So what do we have, what kind of policies for improving infrastructure for physical activity do we have in my city, in my country, in my region? What is the quality of these policies? Or what planning procedures do we have? What is the quality of these planning procedures? So this is a part of the assessment checklist. The other part then is related to improvement. So there are concrete advice is given by the checklist how to improve planning procedures, to improve physical activity, how to improve the building infrastructures for physical activity, and also is related to the other aspects of development. So that's the idea, assessment tool and improvement tool. And then it will be also kind of a booklet that gives good practice examples from the different Impala partners. For example, one with regard to policy already has been mentioned. The Norwegian Action Plan for Physical Activity is really an intersectoral approach to develop, with 8 ministries, to develop this kind of policies. And we also have some examples from Germany. So this is again the focus, and you see this focus is also in all important documents of the EU related to physical activity, social equity, intersectoral collaboration and participation. And what does this mean with regard to developing of infrastructures? So we then go through it with regard to planning, of course. It's participatory and intersectoral planning procedures, which then are good practice, which are high quality if they are done systematically and in a good way. With regard to building kind of good mixed infrastructures that does not say on the one hand it's on physical transportation only. That was a strong focus with the HEPA network for a long time, and it does not only focus on sport facilities, it tries to bring things together and see it really in an integrated way. I think that's very important. So that's it. Thank you.